She couldn't stop crying. Dylan Wang surprises Shen Yue with a wedding ring after ICU miracle. No one expected it. Not the staff. Not his closest friends. Not even her. Especially not her. Because just days ago, he was barely breathing. Barely holding on. Fading in and out of consciousness while the world waited outside his hospital room in fear. But Dylan Wang came back. And when he did, he brought more than life with him. He brought a question. And a ring. The plan no one saw coming. Sources close to the hospital reveal that the idea had started forming in Dylan's mind even before he could fully speak again. When his hands were still shaking. When his thoughts were still fogged with medication and oxygen tubes. But there was one thing he was sure of. One name he said over and over. One presence he asked for again and again. Shen Yue. Is she here? Don't let her leave. A nurse later shared. He couldn't talk properly. But he kept tapping his chest and pointing at her photo. Then making a circle with his fingers. Over and over. None of them knew what it meant at first. But he did. He was asking for a ring. The secret that had to stay quiet. It took everything for the hospital staff to keep it under wraps. Because how do you hide something like that from a woman who never leaves the room? Who sleeps beside the machines? Who knows every twitch in his face? But Dylan found a way. He waited until she stepped out to speak with doctors. He handed a folded note to the head nurse. Inside it were 2 words. Call him. Attached was a phone number. And that number belonged to a private jeweler Dylan had known for years. A man he trusted. A man who was sworn to secrecy. The ring was delivered to the hospital within 24 hours. No labels. No packaging. Just a velvet box wrapped in a hospital glove. Tucked behind Dylan's pillow. Waiting. The moment that broke her. She came back into the room like any other day. Carrying soup she hadn't touched. Wearing the same grey sweater she had been wearing since he woke up. Her eyes tired. Her smile soft. Her heart still heavy with everything they had not yet said aloud. He was sitting up now. Still weak. Still bruised. But alert. And more alive than anyone had seen him in weeks. She sat down. Reached for his hand. And then he whispered. Can you check under the pillow? There's something I dropped. She blinked. Confused. But obeyed. She pulled out the glove-wrapped box. And stared. Then looked up at him. Eyes wide. Hands frozen. He said nothing. Just nodded. Just looked at her like she was the only thing that ever made sense. When she opened the box, everything stopped. She gasped. And then, the tears came. No words, just yes. She didn't ask questions. Didn't speak. Didn't check if anyone was watching. She just cried. And nodded. Over and over. The way someone does when the thing they never thought they could hope for stares them in the face and asks to be true. A nurse watching from the doorway later said. She cried like someone who had waited their whole life for one moment. And never believed it would come. He reached for her hand. Placed the ring there. Shaky fingers. Slow breath. And whispered. I almost didn't get to ask. So I won't waste another second. Fans left in tears after photos leak. Though the moment was private. It didn't stay that way for long. One photo. Blurry. But unmistakably real. Surfaced online hours later. Shen Yue. Face buried in her hands. Dylan's arm extended toward her. A tiny velvet box resting in the middle of the hospital bed between them. It went viral in under 7 minutes. He proposed. In the hospital. After fighting to stay alive. And she said yes without even needing to hear the words. That was the caption that accompanied the photo on every platform. And fans flooded the comments with shock, joy, and raw emotion. I'm crying like it happened to me. This is the realest love I've ever seen. He waited until he could barely sit up just to make it right. Asterisk asterisk no press. No confirmation. Just love asterisk asterisk. Neither Dylan nor Shen Yue made a public statement. Their accounts stayed silent. Their phones reportedly switched off for days. There were no engagement shoots. No diamond close-ups. No exclusive with a magazine. Just the image. Just the moment. Just a love that survived collapse. Chaos. And everything in between. How the staff reacted. The nurses who had witnessed every tear. Every argument. Every night Shen Yue spent reading out loud. Were reportedly the first to celebrate. The head nurse allegedly brought cupcakes into room 4. No candles. No announcements. Just a quiet message scribbled on a paper plate. Sometimes the best love stories begin in silence. And survive the loudest storms. Shen Yue laughed. And for the first time in weeks. Dylan smiled wide enough to be seen beyond the 4. A ring that holds more than promise. The jeweler later spoke anonymously to a fashion insider. And shared that the ring was not just any design. It was crafted 3 years ago. Dylan came in with a sketch. Said he wasn't ready to give it yet. But wanted to have it. Just in case. 3 years. That was before the fight. Before the silence. Before the breakdown. He had been carrying that hope. That quietly. For that long. And now. It finally had a home. Shen Yue's whispered vow. Later that night. With the hospital room dim. And only the sound of Dylan's monitor pulsing gently in the dark. She leaned in. Placed her forehead to his. And whispered. I don't need a stage. Or a dress. Or a crowd. Just you. Just us. Just the life you came back to live with me. He nodded. A single tear slipping down his cheek. And they fell asleep like that. Hands linked. No announcements. No deadlines. Just forever. Beginning again. The future no one expected. Insiders say both actors have placed their careers on pause. Not for drama. Not for scandal. But for something stronger. For healing. For building. For protecting the one thing they nearly lost. Each other. Their teams have reportedly cleared all public appearances until further notice. And both have been offered private lodgings to continue recovery in peace. But fans don't need photos anymore. They don't need statements. Because love like this speaks for itself. And for the first time in a long time, the world isn't asking if they're real. Or if it's PR. Or if it's just another phase. The world is simply watching two people who nearly lost everything choose each other without waiting another second. Who gave you the right? Shen Yue's family clashes with Dylan after secret engagement. The ring was still on her finger. But the peace it brought didn't last long. Because what was supposed to be the quiet beginning of a new chapter was interrupted by voices in the hallway. Raised voices. And the sound of someone slamming a door open. Her brother had arrived. And he didn't come alone. The moment the hospital turned into a battlefield. It started with a knock that didn't wait. A nurse tried to intercept. But the man pushed past her. Where is he? He didn't need to say Dylan's name. The fury in his voice said everything. Shen Yue froze. Still sitting on the edge of Dylan's bed. Eyes wide. Hand instinctively covering the ring. Dylan tried to sit up. But winced. The wound on his side not yet healed. And that's when her brother stepped into the room. Followed by their mother. Her face was pale. But her eyes burned. You almost died, she snapped at Shen Yue. You stayed here night after night for a man who didn't call us once. And now you're wearing a ring. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Dylan tries to explain and fails. I didn't plan for it to happen this way, Dylan said. His voice soft. Careful. Still hoarse from the ventilator. But Shen Yue's brother wasn't listening. You broke her once already. Now she's giving up her entire life for you. And you just trap her in a hospital room with a ring. I didn't trap her, Dylan said. She stayed because she loves me. And I love her. I nearly died. But the only thing I wanted was to make it right. And you think this ring makes it right? That sentence hung in the air. Sharp. Accusatory. Echoing between the walls and the beeping machines. Shen Yue breaks her silence. She stood up. Took a deep breath. Her voice cracked, but she didn't waver. You're angry. I get it. But don't confuse my decision with being trapped. Her mother's expression softened for a moment. Until Shen Yue added, I said yes because I wanted to. Not because I was scared to lose him. But because I already almost did. And I'm not wasting another second living by someone else's expectations. Her brother turned to leave. But her mother stayed behind. Walked to her slowly. Held her hand. Are you sure, Yeye? She whispered. Are you sure this won't hurt more in the long run? Shen Yue smiled gently. Eyes still wet. No. But I'm not afraid of pain anymore. Not with him. The backlash begins. The photo had already gone viral. But it wasn't until a tabloid published a sensational headline that the tide shifted. Hospital proposal or desperate PR stunt? Dylan Wang and Shen Yue's timing questioned. Social media exploded. Some fans defended the couple, saying the moment was pure. That love in the face of near death was nothing short of a miracle. But others were cruel, saying Shen Yue looked too sad. That Dylan looked calculated. That it felt like a setup. She just cried on camera last month, one comment read. And now she's engaged. Too fast. Dylan's team tries to control the damage. His manager issued a short statement, confirming the engagement, clarifying it was private and not for publicity. But it only added fuel to the fire. Now the media wanted more. Where was the ring from? When did he plan it? Was Shen Yue pregnant? Was this to repair his public image after weeks in the hospital? Every theory got worse than the last. Until Shen Yue's agency stepped in, begging the couple to disappear for a few days. To let the storm die down. But disappearing wasn't so easy. Not with nurses and cameras stationed outside every wing of the hospital. Not with reporters offering bribes to staff for footage or quotes. And definitely not with her family still in town.